Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bee in Eden radio show. My name is Sedona Deb. You can follow along at the Sedona Deb blog with pictures and script of the show, plus extra information related to our topic today. This show is being broadcast as part of the Storytellers Campfire Network, and we thank the show sponsors for making this possible. The bee buzz sound that you hear in between the breaks and at the very beginning of the show is a downloadable file from ambientmixer.com, and all of these items are linked off of our show blog at sedonadeb.wordpress.com. Today's topic is about something we mostly all take for granted, the zero. And our show title today is The Mystical Zero. I'd like to ask you a trivia question. When did we all begin using the zero? Would it surprise you to know that we've only been using the zero for 700 years? Yes, that's right. Western civilization and the Babylonian business of finance and credit got along for thousands of years without ever using a zero in their mathematical calculations. Our recent radio shows here at the Bee in Eden have been painting the history of a financial nexus point around the year 500 BC, or before Christ. We've seen how an elite network of moneylenders acquired the power to set up kings and tear down empires when it suited their interests. In today's show, we will fast forward to another financial nexus point in history, a period about 1200 years after Christ. But don't worry, this is all part of my plan as the radio host of A Bee in Eden. Future episodes will connect the dots in this 1700-year timeline to pull back the curtain on the wizards who have been driving the engine of our modern Western civilization this whole time. But let's talk about the quiet mathematical revolution that took place in Europe around that year 1200. This revolution of thought enabled Europe to leave the Roman numeral system behind and replace that with the Arabic numerals that we know and love today. I'm talking about the figure 1, the figure 2, the figure 3, etc., all the way through the numeral 9 plus the 0. Think about all that becomes possible simply by using a 0 in your calculations. Do you think we could have things like iPhones and ATMs without the 0? While we take our first break here, think about how you would even balance your checkbook without using a 0. Could you even do that? We'll be right back. And welcome back. Our story today about the mystical 0 swirls around an educated rebel by the name of King Frederick II. He was born of the Norman royal bloodlines and lived during the 13th century or after the year 1200 AD. Frederick II was king of Sicily and also emperor of Germany's Holy Roman Empire. And yes, by his own device, he became king of Jerusalem at a certain point during the Crusades. This means he was a ruler who lived during the days of the Knights Templar. In fact, if you are listening to this on YouTube or through my Sedona Deb blog page, you'll see a picture of a gold coin that was minted in his kingdom. This coin incorporated the familiar four square Templar cross symbol right there on the coin. This coin was called a gold Augustal. That word is spelled Augustale. It's similar to a future Bohemian word that would be used for coined money, a word you may not have heard of very often called the thaler, spelled Thaler. The thaler would eventually metamorphosize as a word into our commonly known word for the dollar. You'll notice on the picture that there was also a lion stamped on the coin, and the use of the lion as a symbol on minted money from these Babylonian moneylenders will become very evident in future shows. But for our story today, we want to talk about the time when this king, Frederick II, made the acquaintance of a brilliant mathematician in Italy by the name of Fibonacci. If that word and name, Fibonacci, sounds familiar, you may have heard it in the phrase, the Fibonacci spiral. The Fibonacci spiral is a beautiful, natural, mathematical pattern that seems to govern intelligent design in nature. You can observe a spiral growth pattern in objects as distinct from each other as seashells and sunflower seeds. The next time you are out taking a walk, take notice of the way tree branches swing their growth outward from the tree. You will notice that nearly everything grows in spiraling, swirling patterns. Now, Mr. Fibonacci didn't just discover the spiral and number sequences that bear his name. He also was the author of a guidebook about the popular Hindu-Arabic number system in his hometown of Pisa, Italy, in the year 1202. Yes, that's the town made famous by the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was this Hindu-Arabic number system that was already incorporating the use of the zero by the time Fibonacci was born. Fibonacci learned about the Hindu-Arabic number system during the years he spent studying the free-thinking system of calculation that had already become popular among the Muslim Arab merchants who traded along the coast of North Africa. Fibonacci's father was an Italian merchant who worked as a notary public at a trading post in Algeria. His son Leonardo became fascinated by the advantages that this new number system presented. He published a guidebook known today as the Liber Abaci to demonstrate the new system in Europe. Once he did that, the death of the old Roman numeral system became assured. However, the acceptance of such an abstract concept of zero or nothingness as a placeholder in our mathematical calculations did not come easily in Europe. They did not want to accept this. In fact, a man by the name of William of Malmesbury protested that the new number zero was dangerous Saracen magic. He did have a point. Farther down in this show and in this blog, we will demonstrate that the concept of zero did in fact originate within the mysteries of Kabbalah and Indian Jainism. Fibonacci lived 200 years before the printing press was invented, so it was not easy to get a copy of his book. However, his radical new number system did come to the attention of the rebel-minded King Frederick II. Frederick enjoyed both German and Norman parentage. He was also itching for a fight with the church. So describing any new doctrine as dangerous Saracen magic was the best siren call that King Frederick could ever hope for. He was already well versed in Arabic culture. In fact, Frederick is well known for promoting quite a radical multicultural way of life in his kingdom. His Constitutions of Melfi introduced ideas still used today for running central governments, establishing state standards in weights and measures, and improving medical education and requiring that doctors take licensing exams. Already we can see that Frederick II, whose mother was of Norman royal blood, is well primed to pursue the fraternity agenda that we have mentioned before. By the way, Frederick became united with Fibonacci due to the efforts of Frederick's court astrologer, a man by the name of Michael the Scot. The zero and its accompanying Arabic number system were a big hit with this Holy Roman Emperor. The news of the radical math system began to spread right around the same time that Frederick embarked on the Sixth Crusade, a crusade that would go down in history as one of the greatest acts of defiance against the papacy of Rome. Frederick, heir to the throne of Jerusalem by marriage, managed to negotiate a treaty for Western control of Jerusalem without spilling a single drop of blood and without the Pope's permission. The Muslim negotiator on the other side, a man by the name of Al-Kamil, just loved Frederick II. And as a cherry on top, Frederick accomplished all of this while living under an order of excommunication by Pope Gregory IX. In fact, Frederick endured no less than 4 excommunications from the church during his lifetime. But Frederick simply did not care. Now, let us return to that warning issued by William of Malmesbury. Was there indeed some kind of inherent danger in this Saracen magic of the revolutionary zero? Where exactly did the zero come from? It would seem that we have religious mystics from India to thank for the invention of zero as a decimal system placeholder, among others. A Wikipedia article on the origins of zero tells us that the earliest text to use a decimal place value system, including a zero, is a Jain text, and that word is spelled Jain. A Jain text surviving in a medieval Sanskrit translation, which is internally dated to the year AD 458. So we're talking about a period about 450 years after Christ. One of the teachings of Jainism is a non-attachment to possessions, a voiding, we might say, of materialism in one's life. To this last point, a comment from a Facebook user is of note. This user asks the question, why were the Jaina monks studying math? In the modern world, this Facebook user goes on to say, it is common to see religion and science as always in conflict. Yet in ancient India, one cannot untangle mathematics from mysticism. To the Jaina monks, the ideas of spiritual nothingness led to the mathematical zero. Zero denotes nothing. It was derived from the concept of shunya. Shunya means a sort of salvation, when all our desires are nullified, when we go to nirvana or shunya or total salvation. That's the end of that quote. This concept of zero appeared in Jainism, like we said, as early as the year 458 AD. And you'll never guess what other geometric symbol is held sacred in Jainism. Believe it or not, it's the swastika. Now, it might surprise you to know that the swastika symbol has been in use long before the Nazi Party vilified it. Evidence of its importance in sacred philosophy spans the globe, from India to North America. Arizona residents have long recognized that the Hopi of the Southwest still revere this symbol. The Hopi Indians claim relationship with the Mayans of Mexico and Guatemala, who, by the way, had also discovered the use of zero at almost this exact same point in history. But that is a story for another day. From India, the abstract concept of zero spread to the mathematics of the Muslim Arabs. As we have seen above, Fibonacci came in contact with this system during his schooling in North Africa. There remains, however, another important mystical connection which would tend to indicate that King Frederick was well aware of the power that lies beneath such an abstraction. Zero also finds its way in the primer lessons of the Kabbalah. Now let's talk about the role that was played by the Kabbalah and ancient wisdom beliefs in shaping people's use of the zero in our math and bookkeeping routines. In a previous show here on the Bee in Eden, I hinted that the Murasu banking family was already aware of this new belief system that would later come to be known as Kabbalah. To put it simply, Kabbalah is what resulted when an elite fraternity of apostate Israelites fused their ideas with the mysticism of their adopted homeland, Babylonia, after the days of King Nebuchadnezzar. In a future show of Bee in Eden, I will share evidence with you that demonstrates that belief systems like the Hermetica and Gnosticism are ideologies that actually branched off the Kabbalah. All of these ideas influenced the powerful bankers and free thinkers of Europe. This is really what touched off the whole Renaissance. We'll take a quick break here, but come right back to learn the connection between ancient mysticism and the zero that we know so well. And welcome back. Now, there have been several prominent schools of mystic thought that have shaped the fabric of our daily lives ever since the first temple was built in Babylonia. The teachers of the Kabbalah were quick to pick up on the idea of zero from Hinduism. In the Kabbalah, the zero is associated with the first level in their tree of life diagram. We have this displayed in our companion blog at the sedonadeb.wordpress.com webpage, or just Google search the word Sedona Deb blog to find all of the companion items of today's show. I'd like to point out a quotation from an official Kabbalah website that identifies the zero with the very beginning of creation. The website Kabbalah.info says this: in his writings, Rav Yehuda Ashlag explains to us that the light emanating from the Creator designates the desire to create beings and to please them. You might remember that light is the sensation of the Creator, pleasure. This in Kabbalah we refer to as the root phase and is numbered 0. In Hebrew we call it phase shoresh and name it Keter, K-E-T-E-R. It is given the number 0 because it is considered the preliminary phase to actually creating anything at all. That's the end of the quote. For further elucidation on the connection between Kabbalah and the revolutionary introduction of zero into Western math, please take note of the following comments by a professor of Renaissance Studies at Queen Mary, University of London, named Lisa Jardine. The professor is now unfortunately deceased as of October 2015, but she was one of the guests of a BBC audio interview, which is also linked off of our show blog. She says, there's an element of the mysticism of the East in this, because if you have 6 apples on the table and you allocate the number 6 to that, that is a marker for the number of apples on the table. However, if you start looking at an array of numbers, you begin to see patterns in them. If you are the patterning kind, that is to say, you have a slightly more mystical, as it were, Indian mysticism or Kabbalistic mysticism. And notice this point. And then you begin to play games with those markers and realize that they have a reality in their own right. That the number is something you can manipulate and you don't need objects to manipulate it. And the zero emerges at that point. And Indian mathematicians, as it were, at that point, discover what we now understand as mathematics. I once asked my Muslim friend, why did bookkeeping, bills of exchange, and mathematics as we know it come from Islam? Her reply, because Mohammed was a merchant. And that's the end of that segment. Now, to summarize, as stated by one of Professor Jardine's colleagues within that same audio interview, he said, zero unlocks the secrets of the universe. One way that zero does this is by becoming the fulcrum between positive and negative numbers. For the first time in Western thought, it becomes possible to conceptualize and quantify less than nothing. Negative numbers come into existence with as much reality as positive numbers. There are, of course, intellectual landmines ready to be detonated when those principles make their way into the lives of real people and real nations who are dependent on credit. Nevertheless, we must admit that the introduction of abstractions like zero would spur the great analytical renaissance that was just beginning to brew in that year 1225 AD. Now, as a man with strong ties to the Knights Templar related Cistercian order and that Trois fraternity of central France, King Frederick II would have been on the lookout for all manner of heretical ideas with which to challenge the Church, and likewise unlock the secrets of the universe. Certainly, at least, with respect to the universe of trade and finance. In fact, there appears to be quite a latitudinal vein of Gnostic, Kabbalistic, and mystical Muslim thought that extends all across the lands of southern Spain, southern France, and southern Italy during the 13th century. This is that pre-Renaissance period dominated by forward-thinking, albeit heretical, networks of people like the Knights Templar and the Cathars, and ruled by Holy Roman emperors whose territory extended from the Baltics down to the Mediterranean Sea. Therefore, when Fibonacci showed up at Frederick's door with a clear guide for using the Arabic system in trade and record-keeping, it was a match made in heaven. That new math certainly enabled Frederick to speak the Caliphate language when he negotiated a peaceful treaty for Jerusalem that had no backing from the Catholic Pope at all. Interestingly, the Muslims were staunchly opposed to usury, often regarded as the charging of any interest on a loan. Yet these same Arabs had developed a decimal system that would appear ready-made to create such a weapon of mass financial destruction. Indeed, somebody did notice that power, the power to play games of both creation and destruction with those numbers. For that story, we would turn to the Medici family of Florence 200 years further into the future. But that also is a story for another day. In summary, just keep in mind that the zero came to be adopted in our Western culture by men who saw how to use it as a power of creation and destruction in our financial lives. Zero would clear the way for the arrival of powerful tools like the ability to compound interest on loans and the eventual creation of the binary number system, the very language of modern computer systems. And once again, it was a system of religious priesthoods that wove the zero into the very fabric of our reality. Well, my friends, it's time to return to the beehive and tell our future escapades in history. Again, we thank the sponsors of the Storytellers Campfire Network and the website ambientmixer.com for the music that accompanies our show. Until next time, this is Sedona Deb buzzing back to her blog.